Hey, it's Elgin here. So, if I had to take a guess, most of you probably know me from this video, one where I criticized the character designs of both Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss. It was my first ever long-form video, and it oddly released at the same time as a few other Vivziepop critiques, which was strange, but I didn't really think much of it. And the video did shockingly well, garnering over 500,000 views and multiplied my subscriber count by 8. 8?! It was both really exciting and really horrifying seeing this unfold, as it was never something I was ready for at all. I have to say, seeing myself in other people's videos was just as dreadful as it was awesome, because of how fast it went for me. Regardless, it's something I'm eternally grateful for, and I thank all of you for boosting my channel up this much. However, that's not what we're here to talk about. I instead want to focus on another thing about the video. As it got more and more popular and more comments and critiques about it arose, and as my views and opinions shifted here and there, one thing became quite clear to me. My critiques, or at least my execution of the critiques, were not good. A lot of what I said is easy to see in unintended contexts, a lot was also very incomplete in delivering the message I wanted to give, a lot of my critiques were also not very strong, and some even kind of being based on a warped view of what I was criticizing. Needless to say, for a critique video, it's quite rough, and it shows. As much as I do agree with the majority of what I meant to say, I can't help but notice just how subpar my execution was, and how much more I could have done. Even if most of the reception to that video was positive, it didn't really make it better knowing how flawed the video was, and it bugged me regardless of the like to dislike ratio. As a result, I feel compelled to make the video that you're watching right now, in which I improve upon the points I made in the prior video in order to say what I actually meant to say. I'll also mention things that I've changed my mind on and even see in a more positive light than how I did when I first made that original video. I may dislike Vivzie's shows, but I'm not going to stoop so low as to give a poor analysis and never change because of said disdain. Now, of course, this is still just my opinion. If you like these shows and their character designs, then all the power to you. I am not art god. I have no authority over what piece of fiction you like or dislike, and thus don't take this as me attacking you for liking stuff. Now, let us begin. So this is the point where a few cracks started to show in my video. Now, the same body syndrome is still a present and very much considerable issue in these shows, though more in Hazbin Hotel than Helluva Boss, because Helluva Boss actually does quite have a lot more body diversity than Hazbin, thankfully. Now, I will say the point I made is way less of an issue than I made it out to be. Funnily enough, the issue of characters blending in that I brushed off was actually the worst problem that needed addressing, at least in my opinion. I still think that body types can be important for adding to the narrative, but I may have been making it out to seem way worse than it really was. Though that's not the biggest problem with that part of the video. The real problem were the examples I used, because they were hot garbage. Oh my lord, the examples I gave were so bad, mainly because it required specific context that I had in my head that I just did not explain and just ended up sounding like I was saying skinny can't be scary, which is the most incorrect statement that I cannot believe I accidentally implied. So let me clear that up on what I tried to say with the two examples and also show why I don't think they're that big of an issue anymore. So for Alistair, I spoke on how he's a charming yet threatening man, and you'd expect a more strong or imposing figure. Now, I didn't mean this for the threatening part, but more so the charming part, since he does seem to be a manipulative person with how he acts with Charlie and other characters. And so, for a manipulative man who tries to charm or tuck his way into favorable results, I felt that something conventionally attractive for his time period would help with this type of character, as it add to his charming facade through having him look also pretty good to sway potential victims. Not that other body types are unattractive, just that conventional attractiveness is, well, conventional. It'll draw the most people in, and thus be the most effective in luring prey, if you will. But as I said, this isn't really as big of an issue as the prior video made it out to be, so don't take it too much into consideration. Same thing with the Lucifer one, especially since I've changed my mind on him design-wise. I'm now quite neutral with his normal design, since while he doesn't feel very majestic for an angel, It was also written to be like that, and it wasn't in a way that I have a problem with, so I won't complain. I'd still like some more angelic features, like, I don't know, wings on other body parts or something, rather than just having him be pale blonde man. But aside from that, his base form is pretty okay. I vibe with it a little. The animators sure don't though. Anyway, as I've said, the bigger issue isn't the storytelling part of these body types, it's the diversity, which is still a very prominent issue as seen from here. If you want your characters to be more distinguishable from each other, don't do this. Yet, if you've seen my video, you would know this isn't the only type of storytelling with these designs that is to be discussed. Now, this part was the most divisive, and for obvious reasons. Some aspects of a character design meant to convey a story will be strong to some and weak to others, so opinions of this are destined to be the most varied. In my original video, I grouped two related issues into one, but here I'm gonna do the opposite. I'll be splitting those topics into two portions. This one is gonna be more on the storytelling, and the other one will be on the wubifying part. Main reason for this is because as my thoughts changed and expanded, they both grew a lot bigger, and thus should really be put in their own sections even if they are related and sometimes overlap. I also did it because the wubification part is especially where I got a few criticisms that I want to speak about in detail, but before that we gotta discuss how these designs convey their characters. To start, we have Beelzebub once again. One thing I want to address before we get to her is the way I handled gluttony in the prior video. Many people noted how I used gluttony incorrectly, since it's way more than just eating, but just an overindulgence in general. And I actually knew that when making the video. I only used this incomplete interpretation because I initially thought that B was based off of that subsect of gluttony, since a lot of other popular media did that too. However, in hindsight, I was definitely wrong to think that, as looking at her once again, she's definitely based on the full version of gluttony. And that was a mistake on my part. So now we'll judge her on the general indulgence part, which, now that I view her again, she definitely is quite neatly designed to look gluttonous. Her whole design is a sugar rush of colors flowing around. Her lava lamp also adds a bit to that, though for a lot of people was a bit hard to recognize. The bug elements are also hardest to discern as being bug elements, but other than those discrepancies, B does somewhat look gluttonous in terms of design. So why do I still find her design to not fit? Why are a lot of people being confused as to how this could be Beelzebub? Well, as I said, she looks gluttonous, but not like gluttony. One of the reasons for that, which I'll touch on more on the other section, is that she doesn't feel of her position. She's the third highest rank of hell, and the personification of a cardinal sin. And yet, she's designed, written, and treated more like a celebrity than anything, which is really off. She has a low-class boyfriend with no one making a fuss of it, no one really shows up any sign of intimidation or respect about her position, and she also acts out of character for her sin, and she gets worried for Blitz getting drunk and over partying, which like, motherfucker, isn't that what you want? She acts very watered down for what she's supposed to be, and because of that, it makes her a lot harder to recognize as the sin of gluttony herself. However, that's for the other section of the video, so I'll leave it at that for now and discuss more general problems with designs that bleed into many of the characters. One thing that's very prevalent in Hazbin Hotel is the fact that they're based off of objects or animals, but put such subtle or lackluster features of said thing that you'd never know what they're based off of. For example, Alistair is meant to be based off of a deer, and has radio aspects as well due to him being a radio show host in his mortal life. The radio aspects are fine. His voice and dial eyes do work to show that element, along with his mic, though it doesn't look much like a mic to me, more like a magic staff. However, his deer aspects are next to non-existent. His deer horns are the only recognizably deer thing on him, and they look like forks in his base form, and I didn't even notice them until staring at his image to draw him for videos. And even in his full demon form where they grow out, they don't feel like they're specifically referencing deer, because horns are so common for demons in any media, they don't really think much of them at all, or think they're specifically trying to reference a certain animal of sorts. Certain animal? Anyway, they don't feel like they're referencing a certain animal of sorts, which makes them a very weak element as a result. Another character that suffers this immensely is Angel Dust, because I never knew he was a spider until someone told me he was a spider, and that's not something you want to aim for when doing a design. His multiple arms kind of aim at the spider theming, but it's not strong enough to carry that theming on its own. Then there's the fact that he only has 2 eyes. Oh, no, wait. Apparently, those freckles over there are also meant to be eyes? How would anyone see that? He does have some mafia theming, thankfully, due to him being from an Italian mob boss. Said theming being these clothes and his Tommy gun. Though he doesn't have them on a lot, so it's not the strongest thing ever. He's also only a spider because it's meant to be tied to the concept of a web of crime because of his mafioso life. Which is a neat concept, I guess, but it's also so obscure of a concept that almost no one would connect those dots without Vivziepop telling it to you straight to your face. That's a big problem with many of the designs. They're too subtle in telling you anything about the character, either because the features they do use are weak, or they just don't have enough of those features. It leads to a lot of the design choices feeling random and like they don't have much purpose outside of looking cool or pretty. There's also another problem with characters based off of already existing Christian lore. Now, very quickly, let me say this. I have no problem with subversion. It's completely fine to do so and can lead to some interesting takes. However, you need to do it properly. There's a fine balance with subverting a source material that you need to keep, because if you don't, you'll end up in one of 2 extremes. You could either change too little and have barely any subversion at all, or change too much and have the character be unrecognizable from what they were based off of. You need to make sure that you change just enough for it to be a different take, but not too much as to erase literally every semblance of what made that source itself. The reason I don't like the subversion Vivzi has done is because she's ended up on the extreme of changing too much and basically making new characters that took their source material's names. Adam is the worst offender of this, in my opinion. His design says nothing about him being the first man, rather just making him look like a band boy in fancy bathrobes. It also doesn't help that for someone who's been around for 2,000 plus years, he acts like a 13-year-old with no supervision who just got dumped, and he's about as stupid as one as well. The Sins are also suffering from this, but in a much harder way to explain, because they never had a consistent depiction in mythology since ever. It's mainly that their aspects, like other characters, say mostly nothing about them, aside from B, which we've already talked about. The Leviathan, or Levi for example, just looks like a two-headed, internet-savvy Undine. Said two-headedness could have worked in a way, but nothing really interesting was done with that, and it's just kind of there. And while I do suppose having them look like someone focused on appearance could indicate some kind of envious behavior, it's not really strong at all when there's so many other characters that look like that. It just makes her look like another resident of this hell, and makes her supposed position as an embodiment of sin so jarring. Ozzy's showman features could definitely work, I just wish I saw more lustful visuals from him. He's supposedly designed after a rooster, which makes sense because roosters are absolute deviants, but that doesn't work when he doesn't even look like a fucking bird. His tail implies it a tad, but his head just looks like fucking a bone that caught fire. Mammon is probably one of the best Sin designs because he at least looks like he's constantly stopping himself from stealing every wallet in a 20-mile radius. Though he also suffers from barely shows any feature syndrome, since apparently he's based around a centipede, which is impossible to tell since he only has like 6 or so spiny legs and the rest of his body just looks like a Christmas tree. Satan is also on the better side because he does look like he gets pissy, and he at least has some level of intimidation warranted from his sin and his position. However, he also looks like a cookie-cutter cartoon demon wearing a biker fit, so while he fits really boringly. Lastly, there's Belphegor, who's just there. I don't know, I don't have too much to say about her. So to sum up this whole section, the characters suffer from this tell-not-show method of designing, where you hear people say what these characters are based on or resemble, but never actually see enough on their actual appearance, which is terrible for your story, because if you make people rely on media other than the shows to understand important aspects of a character, designs and so on, then you have failed as a writer. However, as bad as this issue is, I feel as though the next point is actually a much larger of a problem that affects more than just the designs. So let's discuss... So we finally arrive here. The part regarding wubification, where I argued about how the designs were dumbed down in terms of creepy, imposing, and demonic tones in place of this cutesy, immature vibe that does not fit with the intent of the shows. However, before I talk about that, there's something I want to address. This part was the most divisive in my first video, garnering a lot of comments arguing against it or criticizing my thought process with that point. I want to take a moment to respond to a few select specific critiques that I got quite a lot, as these critiques I feel either misunderstood what I said or straight up disregarded chunks of what the show intended. The first one was a variation of, "Why do you want the show to be creepy or badass? It wasn't meant to have any of that." To which I say, have you watched the show you're defending? There are countless moments in the two shows where they actively try to be edgy or cool. They fail miserably, but you can tell they tried. The edgy overuse of swearing, these moments with Alistair, the demon transformations, this scene with Stolas, the exterminations, Charlie's demon side, the bloody battles, so on and so forth. Even if it's only for a select sum of characters, Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss want you to think that they're cool and dark. I'm not going to sit here and say that there are no lighthearted elements, or that this is supposed to be this 40k levels of grimdark show, but at the same time it's very evident that on some level, Vivzi wants you to think that her shows are mature and dark, and that her characters are badass or edgy, and thus, I will judge these based on their attempts at that. This video is going to be like 30 or 40 fucking minutes, I can't be bothered to fix this shit. Now where was I about? Judging edginess of characters? Yeah. To which I say, they fall extremely flat. The first thing I want to mention regarding the edginess of the show isn't a character, but is important to them and the show as a whole, and that's the world building of Hell itself. Hell in both shows is kind of the epitome of my biggest gripe with the show, in that it wants to be very mature and cool, but it always just avoids writing anything that would do so. Because in Hell, no one really gets punished at all. Now, in a vacuum, this would be fine. You can shape the afterlife in your story to however you want. For example, in my own angel and demon story, Hell isn't a place of punishment and is only a prison for Lucifer that he ended up turning into his base to create demons and wage war against the angels. And people who commit sin still go to heaven, just with one special roadblock to ensure they never sin again. However, the problem here is that the shows are trying to portray a hell that's told to punish its people. It's still written as a place where only bad people go, and the place is portrayed to be kind of shitty, where there's a lot of death and sadness. The show is also themed around redemption and showing how even sinners deserve a second chance rather than to rot in the infernal depths. So it's definitely supposed to be a place of punishment, but it really isn't shown that way. No one really gets punished there and instead just have their own lives that can be enjoyed. There's people here with technology, social media, and comfortable clothing in this supposed hell. The only things that resemble what was intended for this hell is just the chaotic nature of people killing or banging everywhere in the cities, and the exterminations. And that's weak as baby shit, because the whole high crime thing feels more like a childish Gotham than hell. And it's not even a designed punishment, it's just the sinners doing stupid stuff on their own accord. And the exterminations are also not even a designed part of hell. It's just the angels being paranoid. It feels as if the features that would have given the dark tones this show wanted are just thrown out the window, seemingly replaced for the sake of Viv getting to write savvy or cutesy characters that act all quirky and dumb. Which is why many people believe the writers only chose Hell as a setting because it was edgy and an excuse to call this an adult show. Which, given what I'm about to discuss, yeah, I can definitely see that. Vivziepop seems to have this want to have her cake and eat it too, where she wants this edgy and dark story filled with blood and cryptic dialogue. But she's also really avoidant of doing that properly, because then she can't put in cute furries or scrunklies everywhere to stay in her comfort zone. Not like you can't add cute or lighthearted stuff in a dark setting, it's just that Viv throws the dark setting towards a 10-story fall in the process. So now let's see how the characters handle this dilemma. The ones who suffer from this the most are the sinners. They're probably the characters that detriment the most from being cutesy or simpable due to the fact that they're supposed to be terrible people. Now, I know what you're gonna say. This show is meant to be about redemption, and how even in the worst, most deprived people, there exists a light of humanity in them. I understand that and even quite like that idea, but there's a big difference between showing the humanity of bad people and straight up glamorizing them. Hazbin Hotel does something that I really do not fuck with, in which it takes these characters that are meant to be terrible people and then treat them like silly little beans for you to call quirky or hot. A lot of the bad or weird shit that the main characters do, like Angel Dust harassing people, is treated more as a gag rather than to be used in any mature way, and their toxic side is never really treated with the actual weight that it should. You can make for characters who are bad people and make them able for you to feel for and wish to see more of and hope the best for them, but you shouldn't make characters that are treated both in writing and by fans as if they haven't done any wrong. Hell, even characters whose terrible deeds are meant to be taken seriously still have a ton of glamorization, with their designs being pointlessly cute and having thirst trap merch of them, like Valentino, who I've heard from friends who used to be fans of the show say that many defended him or ignored his shit because he's hot. That's fucked up! The decision to just do this is also really off for two other reasons. The first being that cute character designing or writing aren't compulsory to have characters that you can be compassionate for in some way. You can have ugly or scary designs that still have people loving the characters and feeling for them. Hell, we recently got the Gaslight District, and despite the fact that the characters look like I shat them out while having an anal infection, I mean that in a good way, I'm still very much rooting for them and find them fun and somewhat human. The second reason all of this is odd is the fact that the lore for how the sinners get their designs has them make no sense in universe as well. In the Helliverse lore, when someone dies and goes to hell, their physical appearance is molded by how they lived and died. For sinners, who have lived committing some level of crimes or immoral acts to get to hell, with the main characters being especially heinous, and having many known characters dying in quite unhappy or brutal and painful ways, why the actual hell would any of them be cute? Why would people who have done some level of misdeed have that part tattooed on their body in an appealing way? And why would terrible deaths, like with the main cast, be tattooed in an appealing way either? Unless the universe has a love boner for terrible people and is trying to make them sexy, which just... no. This really wouldn't make sense at all if you were in hell. Or at least the hell that Vivzie intended, but never really tried to make. The only way I could have seen this is if the person had their whole life based on deception in some way. For example, this is my redesign for Alistair. I had the idea where in his life he'd be the type of serial killer to use his good looks and charm to deceive his victims into a false sense of security. And so I designed his base form to be this facade with good looks and all, while still holding some other features related to his deer and radio theming. Then, his true form would compensate for the lack of creepy by showing his true colors through this. Yes, I know this isn't very animator-friendly. I am an aspiring comic artist, not an animator. My creations were never built for the motion pictures. Speaking of Alistair, he is the biggest example of this problem regarding the sinners. He's meant to be the show's most horror-focused character, with all his cryptic lines, all those scenes where he's meant to be threatening, but in execution, he is just not intimidating in the slightest. His big triangle tooth smile is really cartoonish and childishly edgy. His skinniness could have been kind of creepy if it looked more bony, but instead looked more wacky and blends in with every other character, making it unremarkable and not imposing. His monocle and poofy hair make him look goofy, like he's gonna twirl his non-existent mustache and go, "The fools, they really thought they could get me." He exerts nothing but edginess, enough to like fucking cut my fingers off typing about him. It gets worse with his transformation. We'll talk more about transformations in a bit. Where nothing happens except him getting taller and gaining horns, which is such a minimal change that I feel nothing of it. He also gets tentacles, which I'm not sure why he has hentai features, but all I know is it doesn't really fit with anything about him. So, other than those specific deception cases, the very innocent looking designs for these guys just make no sense and feel like there was no care for making them look or feel like bad people. It's very clear that Viv was just not prioritizing it despite it being an important part of the story, though the sinners aren't the only ones who got hit with the wubificationator. The regular demons of hell suffer this problem as well, just to a much lesser extent. I can understand a lot of Hellborn not being too creepy, especially since many demons in actual mythos, such as succubi, look beautiful and such to deceive people into sin. My problem with them rather stems from the fact that they all feel too human. It's been stated that Hellborn are native to Hell and that no sinner can reproduce in Hell, meaning that the demons are their own thing entirely. So my question is, why do they just act and feel like us? They all wear the same kind of clothes as us, they talk like us, and do mostly the same things, with the most changed being that people have magic now. It's a very weird decision to me because nothing really should have catalyzed that. Yes, the sinners and demons do live alongside each other, but at the same time the sinners were merely damned to be there to be punished. And even aside that fact, they wouldn't really cause a society similar to our own given the fact that the only people who go to hell are criminals and such. So even with the human influence, demon society would look very different in many ways. Now, I won't act like this decision is completely bad, because I do get it with how difficult it would be to make a whole society with enough detail to revolve a whole show around. But it still does just feel like a really wasted opportunity, especially since the demonic nature of the Hellborn can only be seen in their horns and their painfully unfunny swearing. By the way, can I just rant about how stupid that "it takes place in hell, what do you expect" argument is? You know what I expect? Good writing. Bad people don't exclusively say fuck, cock, ass every 5 minutes, because swearing isn't some inherently bad person thing. If the only way you can make a person sound bad through dialogue is swearing, then you do not know how to write bad people. You want actual bad people speech? There's down-talking, mocking, catcalling, manipulative speech, threats, lies, degrading. That's how bad people talk! Not by saying fuck a million times. It only makes you sound like a child who discovered 4chan, so for all of you giving this argument, shut the fuck up! What was I saying? Right. So, the Hellborn don't feel as demon as they do human. Kinda disappointing. There's also the fact that their class system is ignored a lot of the time, just to do ship characters for no real reason. Though that's more of a writing thing than a design thing, so let's move on to a different set of characters, that being the very sins. Now, at first glance, the sins are fine in this regard. These of all things are meant to look appealing in order to lure you into committing their sin. Which, I need to ask why they do that? They're in hell, a place of punishment for people who've already sinned. So why have beings to lure these people into doing something that they'd probably do anyway, without any external motivation? Nevertheless, the sins are fine for looking appealing in their base form. But notice how I said base form? Yeah, it's time to talk about transformations. These things basically act as a more bestial form that, from what I could tell, seem to show some of the true demonic nature of these characters. Alistair grows his horns and looks more animalistic, Charlie seems to extend her horns and become more demonic, etc. These are meant to be a showcasing of the more twisted, truly hellish colors within these people. But one small issue. These transformations all suck. Most of the transformations just involve getting bigger and having black or red eyes, which is about the laziest and safest possible execution of a demon transformation ever. Especially since they don't really add much to the characters at all. Alistair, as I said, just gets bigger and grows horns and tentacles, and shit fuck all else, and it just makes him look like he took a Mario mushroom. Charlie, actually Charlie's fine. It's boring and childishly demonic, but that fits her character. Lucifer, however, also has quite the underwhelming transformation, with him just getting horns and red eyes, making him look more like his common folk than him being who is at the top of all of them. Stolas actually has the best transformation. This part where he crashes out is genuinely intense and awesome, and shows that yes, Vivziepop absolutely has the capability to make something actually terrifying. But unfortunately, Bird Boy here is the only one with a transformation that good, and we're stuck with these pitiful attempts, including the worst one, the sins. The sins were the ones that a demonic transformation would go so hard on, because given the nature of these demon forms, it would give them a chance to show the more vile side of their sins, to show the reality of what overindulgence could turn you into, and what happens when you let your desires control you, and become true, terrible sins. But who cares about that? Let's just give them a size boost and a few eyes and extra legs. Just why? These transformations just feel like a way to make the characters look cooler with how little thought seems to be put into so many of them. But thanks to that little thought, these forms feel so damn hollow, and don't really give a sense of actual demonry. That also applies to the designs in general. They stray so far away from any actual demonism or any intimidating nature that you can sense was very much wanted in a lot of these characters. They were wiped away of their hellish nature to just be replaced with colorful humans that act pseudo-badass, and it results in this very underwhelming cast, which is so disappointing considering how cool a show related to demons could really be. And it's not like you need to be so extra as to make them Elden Ring levels of unholy, because I know a lot of you thought that's what I wanted. No. You don't need to add super complex details or make them ultra accurate to the Bible. You don't need to do shit I do to make demons feel like demons, and yet Vivziepop still fumbled at that. It also fails in another way, in which it doesn't give you the feeling of the characters' positions. I've talked extensively about how few characters look or feel like demons, but one thing I didn't mention was that they also don't feel like their position of power. Alistair, Vox, Velvet, and Shitass are all overlords, who are meant to be very powerful and respected amongst Hell by the lower ranks. But you really wouldn't know that they're the higher class unless you were told that they were. The way Vivziepop designed everyone makes them blend in as this really colorful cast, without ever doing much to make them stand out in terms of what position they are. And as such, if you never get told what position they were in, they just blend in with the crowd. For example, with how everyone in Hazbin Hotel has a very glittery and busy style to them, except for Charlie and Vaggie, it'd be really hard to tell regular Sinner from Overlord. You can't tell by their clothing, because everyone is wearing either a suit or something puffy. You can't tell from their posture or accessories or anything of the bunch, because everyone has this similar busy style with very similar trends to them. Helluva Boss is slightly better with Imps and Goetia and Hellhounds all looking distinct from one another and being easy to figure out who's on top of who in terms of power. But then again, these three are all different species that have their own base and set rules as to what should be added to their bodies. So it's kinda hard to mess that power dynamic up, appearance-wise. The Sins, however, suffer this problem. They are the third highest rank in wait, why are the Sinners above Hellhounds and Imps? Why are Sinners above these guys? These bitches are native to Hell and they're outclassed by random dudes being sent there for punishment. Anyway, the Sins are the third highest ranks in Hell, and yet they still feel and have the look of civilians. None of them really have anything to them that distinguishes them from as being more powerful or high in status when it comes to their designs. They don't blend in as much as the Sinners and Overlords do with each other, but they still feel very watered down and do still share this busy style that can be seen in many residents of Hell. Some of them are quite large in size, which does help a bit, but it's not really enough to cement them in their position. To sum this whole section up, the characters have a very poor attempt at demonic elements and imposing nature that was definitely intended to some degree, and as a result they don't really get treated in mature or serious ways by the show or audiences, and are also lacking in that special oomph that tells you what kind of power or force you're dealing with, leading to the most underwhelming cast I've seen in a good while. So, what can we take from all this? Well, for me, it's that Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss want to be a lot of things. But one thing they're not is mature. For supposedly adult shows, many of the aspects just feel very childish or amateur. The humor is very stale and immature, mostly being 10,000 sex jokes and swears littered across. The world of Hell itself seemingly sucked away of any of the dark tones that would have given it the oomph of an adult show, and the character designs suffer the same thing, looking more like a Saturday cartoons without the leeway of looking cute to throw you off like with Happy Tree Friends. There's a lot of other problems with these shows, but this is the one that personally turned me away the most. I never wanted something eldritch or complex or something out of a Berserk panel. I just wanted to look at these shows and at least to some extent say, that's a demon. That is Hell. And I just didn't get that for a lot of the series. And it's not like it was impossible to get that either. I got many people trying to argue that it's just Vivzie's art style, and that I shouldn't expect something creepy or badass out of a style so cute, when that's not true at all. Something people seem to not understand is that a style does not dictate what you can and cannot draw. Anything can be drawn in any style, even something creepy in a cute style. The only thing that ever stops you from drawing something is your own will to do it. If you don't make an effort to get out of your comfort zone and try new things, only then will you not be able to draw something. And that appears to be a struggle that Viv has, because she absolutely can draw something terrifying or imposing. The aforementioned Stolas transformation was a great example of what she's capable of if she actually tries. But good God, she seems so damn stubborn to not do so. I know that much given how she's responded to criticism, down-talking it and giving the same bullshit defenses that her fans give. This all really frustrates me because I see potential in these shows. As much as I dislike Vivzie as a person with everything the comments have told me about her, I do see a good artist in there. Her shows may be trash, but they're not all beyond hope. I can see potential, I see inspiration, I see a passion behind them. They're flawed, but not soulless. And that's why I'm so frustrated. These shows can be good, and they definitely still have a chance to be good, with the recent announcement of upcoming seasons being greenlit. It's just that the creators seem so stubborn to get out of these old habits and experiment with new things for the better of their shows. Sure, they're Viv's shows, and she has every right to do whatever she wants with them. But that does not make them good, and I want them to be good. Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss have been the pioneers of indie animation and set the standard for what shows can be, and I'm really happy to see what they've done for indie creators. But at the same time, I want them to be better because these are the shows that people will use as an example, something to take notes from and be inspired by, and I want people to have a good example to take from to make the best possible work they can, which is why I criticize these shows. I want them to be good. I want to see these shows and feel content with them being seen as the golden standard. Because right now, all I see is a mess. A mess with a soul, but a mess regardless. And that's the end of my video. I have to say, getting this done was a nightmare and a half to do. Mainly because most of the time I spent on it was just me struggling to get the motivation to do it at all. The script was also a massive hurdle since there were multiple scrapped versions that just did not work for me. Though now I can finally be free knowing I cleared up everything I wanted to say, and can finally be liberated from having to talk about these shows again. This will be the last time I ever talk about Hazbin or Helluva in a while, mainly because I don't really like these shows, and it's not enjoyable talking about them for so long. Besides, character designs are kind of the only thing I'm good enough at to talk about confidently, so I've already dried up my critiques for it anyway. So, what did you think? Were my points good? Were they trash? Well, tell me in the comments, but either way, I don't really care anymore, and I'd really love to do something else. I have characters of my own and other art ideas I want to talk about on this channel, and so I'm ready to just do them in the next century. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye!